The Whitmore estate loomed like a fortress at the end of the long, paved driveway. Tall iron gates stood guard, separating the pristine world inside from the reality beyond. Hannah adjusted the strap of her worn-out purse and took a deep breath before pressing the intercom button. "Yes," came a flat voice, likely from one of the housekeepers. "It's Hannah. I'm here for my shift," she answered, already bracing herself for whatever cold reception awaited her today. A buzzing sound signaled the gates unlocking. As she stepped through, the wind carried the scent of freshly trimmed hedges, the kind only money could maintain. The grand house, with its flawless white columns and enormous glass windows, was a picture of wealth, but to Hannah it was simply a workplace. She had been employed as Benjamin Whitmore's nanny for the past 7 months, though she often felt like an intruder rather than a valued caretaker. The Whitmores weren't cruel in an outright way. No, their disdain was more insidious. It was in the way they spoke to her, the dismissive glances, the constant reminders that she was just the help. Margaret Whitmore, in particular, made sure she never forgot it. As soon as Hannah stepped inside, she felt the cold air of the estate wrap around her. Everything was spotless, from the gleaming marble floors to the grand chandelier that hung like a jewel in the center of the foyer. A housekeeper scurried past without making eye contact, likely afraid of drawing unwanted attention from her employers. Hannah made her way to the nursery, eager to see Benjamin. The moment she pushed open the door, her heart softened. There he was, standing in his crib, his tiny fingers gripping the wooden railing. His round face lit up the instant he saw her, and he let out a delighted squeal, reaching out his chubby arms. "Good morning, my little sunshine," she cooed, lifting him into her arms. His warmth, his familiar baby scent, it was the only thing that made this job worth it. Benjamin nestled his head against her shoulder, babbling in that sweet, nonsensical way that only babies could. Hannah held him a little tighter. If she could, she would protect him from everything, even the coldness of his own home. But her moment of peace was shattered by a sharp voice from the doorway. "You're late." Hannah turned to see Margaret Whitmore, her arms crossed over her chest. She stood tall, exuding an air of effortless superiority. Her silk robe, perfectly pressed, fell gracefully around her slender frame. Not a single strand of her blonde hair was out of place. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Whitmore," Hannah said quickly. "The subway." "I don't care," Margaret cut her off, stepping closer. "I expect punctuality. If you can't handle something as simple as arriving on time, maybe this isn't the right job for you." Hannah's stomach clenched, but she forced herself to stay calm. "It won't happen again." Margaret's sharp eyes roamed over her before she clicked her tongue in disapproval. "What are you wearing?" Hannah looked down at her simple cotton blouse and jeans. They were clean and presentable, but clearly that wasn't enough. "You come into my house looking like this?" Margaret continued. "Your shirt is wrinkled. Do you even own an iron?" Hannah bit the inside of her cheek, forcing herself to stay composed. "I'll make sure to press my clothes from now on." Margaret let out a dramatic sigh. "And another thing," she said, waving a hand. "I've noticed you holding Benjamin too much. He's becoming too attached to you." Hannah stiffened. "He's a baby, ma'am. He needs affection." Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's not for you to decide. You're here to take care of him, not to pretend you're his mother." The words stung more than they should have. Hannah nodded, keeping her face neutral. "Understood." Margaret lingered for another second before turning on her heel. "Make sure his feeding schedule is followed exactly. I don't want him getting spoiled," she added before disappearing down the hallway. Hannah exhaled slowly. She looked down at Benjamin, who was sucking on his thumb, oblivious to the tension in the room. She smiled softly, pressing a kiss to his tiny forehead. "Don't worry, sweetheart," she whispered. "I'm here for you." That evening, Hannah sat across from her best friend, Sylvia, in a quiet diner a few blocks from her apartment. Sylvia stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, watching Hannah with concern. "Margaret's a nightmare, isn't she?" Hannah let out a dry laugh. "That's putting it mildly. You need to get out of there." Hannah sighed. "I wish it were that simple. But I can't leave Benjamin." Sylvia leaned forward. "But Hannah, it's not like you can stay forever. Families like the Whitmores don't keep nannies long-term. They see us as disposable. The moment you do something they don't like, you'll be out the door." "I know," Hannah admitted, "but I love that baby. He needs me." Sylvia reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Just be careful, okay? I have a bad feeling about that place." Hannah forced a small smile. She appreciated her friend's concern, but deep down, she already knew Sylvia was right. Back at the Whitmore estate, Hannah carefully rocked Benjamin in the dimly lit nursery. The house was silent, its grand halls empty now that the staff had retired for the night. The baby stirred in her arms, his tiny fingers clutching the fabric of her shirt. She hummed softly, a lullaby from her childhood, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're safe with me," she murmured. But deep down, she knew that safety was something she could never truly promise. Because in this house, one mistake could cost her everything. If you like interesting stories, leave your like, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications to stay updated with all our content. And let us know in the comments where you're watching this video from. We'd love to hear from you. The tension in the Whitmore house had always been palpable, a quiet storm brewing beneath the surface of wealth and perfection. But that morning, something in the air felt different, heavier, as if the inevitable was about to unfold. Hannah moved through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, preparing Benjamin's bottle while balancing him on her hip. The baby babbled contentedly, his tiny fingers gripping the fabric of her blouse, as if she were his anchor in a world too large for him to understand. Margaret sat at the marble island, sipping her morning coffee. Her manicured nails tapped against the porcelain cup as she scrolled through her phone, not sparing Hannah a glance. "Make sure he's dressed properly today," Margaret said flatly. "I don't want him looking unkempt when Richard comes home." Hannah forced a polite nod, though she wanted to roll her eyes. Benjamin was a baby. He could be dressed in silk and still end up covered in mashed bananas within minutes. But arguing was pointless. She had learned that silence was often her best defense. Margaret set her phone down, finally looking up. "And I don't want him getting too attached to you, Hannah. I've told you this before." Hannah inhaled sharply. "Not this again. He's just a baby, Mrs. Whitmore. He needs affection." Margaret's expression hardened. "He needs discipline. And I need a nanny who understands that her job is to follow instructions, not act like his mother." Hannah's grip on Benjamin tightened ever so slightly. She wanted to speak up, to tell Margaret how cold and unfeeling she sounded. But before she could, the baby squirmed in her arms, growing restless. Margaret sighed, rubbing her temples. "Just do what you're told, Hannah." And with that, she returned her attention to her phone, dismissing Hannah as if she were nothing more than a piece of furniture. That afternoon, the house was quieter than usual. Margaret had stepped out for an appointment, leaving Hannah alone with Benjamin. She carried him into the sunlit playroom, setting him down among his favorite toys. The room, designed to look like a perfect children's paradise, felt oddly impersonal, too pristine, too staged. Benjamin, however, was oblivious to its emptiness. He giggled as he clapped his hands, delighted by the jingling sounds of a plush toy. Hannah smiled, kneeling beside him, grateful for these small moments of pure joy. Then, the front door slammed. Hannah frowned. Margaret wasn't supposed to be back so soon. She quickly lifted Benjamin, cradling him against her hip as she stepped toward the hallway. But before she could reach the door, a piercing cry filled the air. It all happened in seconds. Benjamin, in his eagerness to reach for a toy, lunged forward in Hannah's arms. The sudden movement caught her off guard, and before she could steady him, his tiny forehead collided with the sharp edge of a nearby coffee table. The sound was sickening. A hollow thud, followed by an ear-splitting wail. Hannah's breath caught in her throat. No, 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 no. She immediately pulled him close, her hands trembling as she inspected his forehead. A small red bump was already forming. "Sure, sweetheart, you're okay," she whispered frantically, rocking him back and forth. But before she could even begin to calm him, Margaret stormed into the room. The moment she saw Benjamin's tear-streaked face and the forming bruise, her expression twisted into something dark and unforgiving. "What did you do?" she shrieked, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor as she rushed forward. Hannah's mouth opened, but before she could explain, Margaret snatched Benjamin from her arms. "How could you be so careless?" Margaret's voice was shrill, laced with fury and panic. "Look at his face. Oh my God, Richard is going to kill me." "Mrs. Whitmore, please listen," Hannah pleaded. "It was an accident. He moved too fast." "I don't want to hear it." Margaret cut her off, her eyes flashing with pure disdain. "You were supposed to be watching him. I trusted you with my son, and you let this happen." Hannah felt the room spinning around her. This wasn't fair. Benjamin was fine, frightened but fine. But Margaret wasn't seeing reason. She was seeing a problem that needed to be erased. Before Hannah could say another word, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Richard Whitmore had arrived home. He was a tall, imposing man with a commanding presence, his expensive suit perfectly tailored to his frame. Unlike his wife, he was usually indifferent toward Hannah, barely acknowledging her existence. But tonight, the moment he saw his son's bruised forehead, his expression darkened. Margaret turned to him, her voice dripping with controlled hysteria. "She let him get hurt, Richard. I walked in and found him like this." She wasn't paying attention. Hannah's heart pounded in her chest. "That's not true. It was an accident." Richard held up a hand, silencing her. His gaze was cold, unreadable. "My son's safety is my priority," he said, his tone measured but final. "You need to leave, Hannah." The words hit like a punch to the gut. Hannah's breath hitched. "Please, Mr. Whitmore. I swear, I would never." "I don't care," Richard interrupted, adjusting the cuffs of his expensive watch. "Margaret wants you gone. That's enough for me." Hannah felt her chest constrict. She turned to Margaret, desperation creeping into her voice. "Please. You know I love him. I would never hurt him." But Margaret only stared at her with a chilling satisfaction. "You have 5 minutes to get your things," she said. And just like that, it was over. Hannah stood frozen as Margaret turned away, already soothing Benjamin as if he were a delicate porcelain doll she needed to repair. Richard had already moved on, typing on his phone, likely arranging for security to escort her out. Her hands trembled as she stumbled out of the room, feeling as though she were walking through a nightmare. She had no money, no job, and no home. But worse than all of that, she had lost Benjamin. Hannah stood on the cold sidewalk, clutching the handle of her small, battered suitcase. The Whitmore estate loomed behind her, its grand, opulent walls now nothing more than a painful memory. Her mind raced. She had nowhere to go. The realization hit her like a blow to the chest. In the span of a single evening, she had lost everything: her job, her home, and most devastatingly, Benjamin. The thought of never seeing him again made her stomach churn. A sharp gust of wind cut through her thin jacket, sending a shiver down her spine. Her fingers tightened around the suitcase handle as she forced herself to move forward. One step. Another. But where? She had lived with the Whitmores as part of her employment. The small room tucked away on the 3rd floor had been hers for the past 7 months. Now, she was just another person wandering the streets of New York, swallowed up by the indifferent city. Her first instinct was to call Sylvia. She fumbled for her phone, her frozen fingers struggling to unlock the screen. One new message. Her stomach twisted. Maybe, just maybe, Margaret had reconsidered. Maybe she would get a second chance. But when she opened it, her heart sank. It was from Margaret. "Don't come back. I don't want you near my son again." Hannah inhaled sharply, blinking back the sting of tears. She had expected cruelty, but seeing it in writing made it final. Margaret didn't just fire her, she erased her. She clenched her jaw, shoving the phone back into her coat pocket. This wasn't the time to break down. With nowhere else to turn, she made her way to Sylvia's apartment. Sylvia lived in a tiny studio apartment, barely big enough for one person, let alone two. But the moment Hannah arrived, suitcase in hand, Sylvia pulled her inside without hesitation. "God, Hannah, you're freezing," she murmured, rubbing Hannah's arms to warm her. "Sit down. I'll make some tea." Hannah sat at the edge of Sylvia's small couch, feeling numb. Sylvia moved swiftly, filling the kettle, then turning to face her. "I still can't believe they fired you over an accident." Hannah let out a bitter laugh. "Margaret needed someone to blame. It was easy to make me the villain." Sylvia shook her head, pacing the tiny kitchen. "You gave them everything, and they threw you out like garbage." Hannah lowered her gaze. "I knew it was coming. Maybe not like this. But eventually, we're disposable to people like them." Sylvia leaned against the counter, crossing her arms. "So what now?" That was the question, wasn't it? Hannah exhaled slowly. "I need to find another job. Fast." Sylvia hesitated, then reached for her phone. "I saw a posting earlier. It's not ideal, but it's work." She scrolled for a few moments before turning the screen toward Hannah. "Nanny needed. Urgent. Baby, 9 months. Light housekeeping required. Room and board included. Apply in person." The address was in an unfamiliar part of town. Hannah hesitated. "Who placed the ad?" Sylvia shook her head. "Just says P. Calloway. No details. But it's something, right?" Hannah stared at the screen. It felt like a risk. But what choice did she have? She nodded. "I'll go first thing in the morning." The next day, Hannah stood outside a large, grey stone house on the Upper East Side. It was imposing in a different way from the Whitmore estate, less extravagant, more severe. The windows were dark, the curtains drawn. The iron fence surrounding the property gave the impression that whoever lived inside preferred solitude. Hannah clutched her resume in one hand and rang the doorbell. A few moments later, the door creaked open. A man stood there, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his forearms. His dark hair was slightly unkempt, and his sharp, chiseled features made him look both intimidating and effortlessly refined. But his eyes, deep and unreadable, were what unsettled her the most. Yes. His voice was low, controlled. Hannah swallowed. I'm here about the nanny position. He studied her for a long moment before stepping aside. Come in. She hesitated before crossing the threshold. The inside of the house was just as cold as its exterior. The decor was minimal, functional, but devoid of warmth. This way, he said, leading her to a sitting room. She followed, her senses on high alert. There was something about this house, about him, that felt off. The man gestured toward a chair. Sit. She did, gripping her resume as he took the seat across from her. My name is Philip Calloway, he said. My son, Henry, is 9 months old. His mother is not in the picture. Hannah nodded, waiting for more. You will be responsible for him, he continued. Feeding, bathing, putting him to sleep. But I'll require additional help around the house. Cleaning. Organizing. Hannah's brows furrowed. I thought this was a nanny position. Philip's expression didn't change. It is. But I don't hire people who only do half the job. Her stomach twisted. She knew what this meant. Long hours, exhausting work, no appreciation. But she needed this job. You'll live here, he added. Room and board included. Payment will be weekly. Do you have experience? Hannah nodded. 7 months with my last family. And before that, I worked as a nanny for 2 years. Philip leaned back in his chair, studying her. Do you have any personal attachments that might interfere with your work? She flinched at the question. Benjamin's face flashed in her mind, but she pushed the image away. No, she said quietly. Philip nodded, as if satisfied. Be ready to start tomorrow morning, he said. 6 a.m. sharp. Hannah felt the finality of his words settle in. This was it. A new job, a new life. But as she stepped out of the cold, grey house, a shiver ran down her spine. Something about Philip Calloway wasn't right. And soon she would find out why. Hannah's alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m., jolting her awake. The small room she had been given in Philip Calloway's house was cold, almost barren. A single bed, a wooden dresser, and a narrow window covered by thick grey curtains. No warmth, no personal touch, just 4 walls that felt more like confinement than shelter. She sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes. The events of the past few days weighed heavily on her. The Whitmore estate, Benjamin's cries, Margaret's cold eyes. She forced the memories down. That life was over. This was her fresh start. Even if something about this house, and about Philip Calloway himself, made her uneasy. By 6 a.m. sharp, Hannah stood in the kitchen, already preparing Henry's bottle. She hadn't even met the baby yet. Philip had given her no instructions other than to be awake, ready, and prepared for work. The house was eerily silent. Then, footsteps. Philip entered the kitchen, his movements precise, his expression unreadable. Henry wakes up at 6:30, he said without a greeting. He'll need to be fed, changed, and dressed. After that, you'll take him for a walk. I don't like him staying indoors too long. Hannah nodded, keeping her voice steady. Understood. Philip's cold gaze flickered over her. You'll also be responsible for cleaning the house, he added. I expect everything to be in order by the time I return from work. Dishes, laundry, floors, bathrooms. Hannah's stomach tightened. I thought my job was primarily to care for Henry, she said carefully. Philip's expression didn't change. You live here. You work here. Everything in this house is your responsibility. She held his stare for a brief second before lowering her gaze. All right. Philip's voice was firm, leaving no room for negotiation. I don't tolerate laziness. If you can't handle it, leave now. Hannah swallowed her pride. She couldn't afford to lose this job. I can handle it. Philip watched her for a moment longer before nodding. Good. Then, without another word, he turned and left. Hannah exhaled slowly. This wasn't just a nanny job. It was servitude. But she had no choice. She had to endure. The first time Hannah met Henry Calloway, she felt her heart soften. The baby was tiny, much smaller than Benjamin. His dark curls stuck to his forehead, his brown eyes wide and filled with quiet curiosity. Hannah lifted him gently from the crib. "Hey there, little one," she murmured, rocking him slightly. Henry blinked up at her, studying her face. Then, without warning, he reached up and grabbed a handful of her hair, letting out a small, delighted giggle. Hannah laughed despite herself. This child deserved love, and if his father couldn't give it to him, then she would. The days blurred together. Hannah's routine became relentless. She woke before dawn, cleaned before Philip even left the house, spent the day tending to Henry, walking him through the quiet neighborhood, feeding him, putting him down for naps. Then she scrubbed floors, washed dishes, did laundry. She never stopped moving. Philip never acknowledged her efforts. If the house was spotless, he said nothing. But if he found a speck of dust, a dish out of place, or a single crease in his shirts, he let her know. "You call this clean?" he snapped one evening, holding up a glass with a barely visible smudge. "Are you blind?" Hannah clenched her fists, keeping her voice neutral. "I'll do it again." "Do it right the first time," he muttered, setting the glass down with a sharp clink. She swallowed the anger rising in her throat. She wouldn't break. Then came the first real humiliation. One night, after another exhausting day, Hannah dragged herself up to her tiny room, ready to collapse onto the small bed. But when she opened the door, she froze. Her bed was covered in Philip's clothes, shirts, trousers, jackets, all piled carelessly on top of her blanket. Her stomach twisted. Footsteps approached behind her. Philip leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. His expression was calm, but his words were anything but. "I need more space in my closet," he said simply. "You can sleep on the floor if it bothers you." Hannah turned to him, disbelief flashing in her eyes. "You're taking my bed?" Philip's gaze was indifferent. "I gave you a place to stay, didn't I?" Her jaw tightened. "I work for you. I don't belong to you." Philip's expression didn't change. "You live here because I allow it. If you don't like it, leave." Hannah's heart pounded. She had nowhere to go. Philip knew it, and he was using it against her. Her fingers curled into fists, but she forced herself to breathe. Finally, she nodded. "Fine," she said quietly. Philip studied her for another moment before turning and walking away. Hannah stared at the mess on her bed. She could clean it, move the clothes, find some space for herself. But something inside her snapped. She couldn't live like this. Not another day. Not another minute. She had to leave. She packed what little she had in her suitcase and stepped quietly into the hallway. The house was dark, silent. Her heart pounded as she made her way to the front door. As she reached for the handle, a deep voice cut through the silence. "You're leaving." She turned sharply. Philip stood at the top of the stairs, his face unreadable in the dim light. Hannah held her ground. Yes. He took a slow step forward. You'll regret it. She lifted her chin. I doubt that. For the first time, something flickered in his gaze. A strange amusement. He let out a quiet, almost mocking laugh. Go then. Hannah turned back to the door, inhaled sharply, and stepped outside. The moment the cold air hit her face, she felt it. Freedom. But as she walked away from Philip Calloway's house, the weight of reality settled over her. She had no job, no home, and no idea what came next. But she had one thing she hadn't had in weeks: self-respect. And that was enough. For now. The city lights flickered around Hannah as she walked aimlessly through the quiet streets of New York, clutching the handle of her suitcase. Her breath came out in small, visible puffs against the cold night air. She had no destination, no job, no home. Her body ached from exhaustion, her limbs sore from weeks of relentless work under Philip Calloway's control. But more than anything, it was her heart that felt heavy. She had endured so much, too much, and yet, here she was, starting over again. Hannah spent the night in a cheap motel, using what little savings she had left. The room was small, the air stale, the walls thin enough that she could hear the muffled arguments of a couple next door. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her phone. No messages, no missed calls, no one looking for her. Not that she had expected otherwise. She was completely alone. Sighing, she pulled up a nanny job search website, scrolling through endless listings. Most required references. She had none, at least none she could use. The Whitmores had erased her. Philip Calloway would likely do the same. Her chest tightened. She kept scrolling, and then an ad caught her eye. Nanny needed for a 5-year-old girl. Full-time. Room and board included. Must be patient and attentive. Apply in person. Ask for Eleanor Harper. The location wasn't far. Hannah hesitated. It felt different. Unlike the other job postings, it had no strict requirements, no intimidating list of responsibilities. And something about the wording, "must be patient and attentive," struck her as strange. Still, she had no other options. She took a deep breath and saved the address. Tomorrow, she would go. The next morning, Hannah arrived in front of a Victorian-style townhouse nestled in a quiet neighborhood. It was different from the Whitmore estate and Philip Calloway's cold mansion. The house had a quiet elegance, its faded blue shutters and overgrown ivy giving it a strangely timeless feel. But something about it felt isolated, like it had been forgotten by the rest of the world. Hannah hesitated before pressing the doorbell. A few seconds passed. Then, the door creaked open. A woman stood there, her figure slender, her graying auburn hair neatly pulled back into a bun. She was in her mid-50s, her face lined with age, but her brown eyes were gentle. For the first time in a long while, Hannah wasn't met with scrutiny or disapproval. The woman gave a soft smile. "You must be here for the job." Hannah nodded. "Yes. My name is Hannah. I saw the ad." "I'm Eleanor Harper," the woman interrupted warmly, stepping aside. "Please come in." Hannah hesitated before crossing the threshold. The inside of the house was quiet, too quiet. The furniture was elegant but old, the walls adorned with faded paintings, and the air carried the faint scent of lavender and dust. Something about it felt untouched, as if time had stopped here. Eleanor gestured for her to sit in the living room. "Would you like some tea?" Hannah shook her head politely. "I'd rather hear more about the job, if that's all right." Eleanor smiled. Of course. She settled into a chair, folding her hands neatly in her lap. My daughter Lily is 5, she explained. She's very quiet. Shy, really. She doesn't take well to new people. Hannah frowned slightly. Most 5-year-olds weren't shy. They were energetic, curious, always asking questions. Still, she nodded. I understand. What are her daily routines? Eleanor's smile flickered, just for a second. She spends most of her time in her room, she said. She likes to play alone. She's delicate. Hannah's stomach tightened. Something about the way Eleanor spoke didn't feel right. She tried to push the thought away. Would I be allowed to meet her? Hannah asked carefully. Eleanor hesitated. Not yet, she said softly. She needs time to adjust. Hannah's unease deepened. A 5-year-old girl who never left her room. Something was wrong. But before she could question it further, Eleanor smiled again. You'll have room and board, she said, and I'll pay you weekly. It's a simple job, really. Just make sure Lily is comfortable. Hannah felt a cold prickle down her spine. Every instinct in her told her to walk away. But then she thought about the alternative. The streets. Hunger. The uncertainty of what came next. She needed this job, even if something about this house felt off. Hannah moved in that same evening. Her room was on the 2nd floor, next to Lily's. The hallway was long and dimly lit, the wooden floors creaking under her footsteps. And every time she passed Lily's door, it was locked. She never saw the child. Not once. At night, the house was so silent, she could hear the ticking of a clock somewhere in the distance. But on her 3rd night, she heard something else. A giggle. A soft, childlike laugh coming from behind Lily's closed door. Hannah sat up in bed, her heart pounding. She listened. Silence. Had she imagined it? And then, a whisper. A faint, almost sing-song voice murmuring words she couldn't quite make out. Lily. Hannah swung her legs over the bed and stepped toward the door. Her fingers hovered over the handle. Then, a shadow moved beneath the door. Hannah's breath hitched. The soft murmur of a lullaby drifted through the wood. The hair on her arms stood on end. Something wasn't right, and she was about to find out why. Hannah stood frozen outside Lily's door, her breath shallow, her pulse quickening. The soft lullaby continued, an eerie, slow melody barely audible through the thick wooden door. A mother's lullaby should have been comforting, but there was something about the way Eleanor sang it that made the hairs on Hannah's arms rise. It was too slow, too deliberate, almost detached. Then, a whisper, a faint, murmured conversation. Hannah pressed her ear to the door, straining to make out the words. It wasn't just Eleanor's voice. Someone else was responding. Lily. The child's voice was too low to make out, but it was there, soft, breathy, almost distant. Hannah hesitated. Should she knock? She had been working for Eleanor for 3 days, and she still hadn't seen Lily, not once. The girl's door remained shut at all times, and Eleanor always had an excuse. She's sleeping. She's not feeling well today. She needs her space. Hannah's stomach twisted. Something wasn't right, and she wasn't going to ignore it. Taking a slow, steady breath, she knocked lightly on the door. Silence. Then, the lullaby stopped. Hannah's heartbeat thundered in her ears. She knocked again, firmer this time. Eleanor. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. Is Lily awake? For a few seconds, there was no response. Then, the sound of footsteps. A second later, the door swung open. Eleanor stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. Hannah swallowed hard, trying to appear calm. "I heard voices," she said carefully. "Is Lily all right?" Eleanor tilted her head slightly. "She was having trouble sleeping," she said, her voice too even, too calm. "I was soothing her." Hannah peered past her, but the room was completely dark. "Can I check on her?" she asked. Eleanor's smile froze. "Lily needs her rest," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Then she stepped forward, slowly closing the door right in Hannah's face. A sharp click followed. She locked it. Hannah felt her skin prickle. Something inside that room was being hidden, and she was going to find out what. The next morning, Eleanor was back to her usual self, calm, polite, and eerily composed. She moved around the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared tea. "You must be adjusting well," she said over her shoulder. "I haven't heard any complaints." Hannah forced a smile. "It's been peaceful here." Eleanor's lips curled slightly. "That's the beauty of this house. No distractions. Just quiet." Hannah hesitated before asking, "Will Lily be coming down for breakfast today?" Eleanor froze. It was subtle, so subtle, but Hannah saw it. The slight pause in her movements, the way her fingers tightened around the porcelain cup. Then, just as quickly, Eleanor relaxed. "Not today," she said with an easy smile. "She prefers to eat alone." Hannah nodded, pretending to accept the answer. But her instincts screamed that Eleanor was lying. And later that night, she would prove it. At 1 a.m., the house was silent. Hannah lay awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting. She had made up her mind. Tonight, she was going to see Lily. Slowly, carefully, she slipped out of bed and tiptoed into the hallway. The wooden floors creaked under her weight, but the house remained still. She approached Lily's door, her heart pounding so loudly she was afraid it would wake Eleanor. Then, she saw it. The key. It was sitting on the nearby bookshelf, carelessly placed among old, dusty trinkets. Hannah reached for it, her fingers trembling. She hesitated. What if she was wrong? What if Lily really was just a shy, reclusive child? But deep down, she knew better. Her pulse hammering, she slipped the key into the lock and turned it. The door creaked open. Hannah stepped inside. And then, her breath caught in her throat. Because there was no child in that room. Only a doll. A porcelain doll, dressed in real baby clothes, its face carefully painted to resemble a child's delicate features. A crib sat in the corner, filled with stuffed animals. Tiny shoes lined the floor. A dresser held neatly folded toddler-sized clothes. But there was no Lily. There never had been. Hannah staggered back, her hands flying to her mouth. She turned and collided with Eleanor. The woman stood in the doorway, watching her. Her expression was calm. Too calm. Hannah's breath came in short gasps. "Eleanor, where is Lily?" The older woman didn't blink. "Lily is right there," she said softly, nodding toward the doll. Hannah felt the blood drain from her face. "No," she whispered. "No, she's not." Eleanor's smile was cold. "You don't understand," she murmured, stepping forward. "Lily is still here. She never left." Hannah's chest tightened. She took a slow step back. "She's dead," she whispered. "Isn't she?" Eleanor's eyes glazed over, lost in some distant memory. Then, tears filled them. "I lost her 5 years ago," she murmured, her voice softer now, broken. She was my world, and when she was gone, I couldn't let her go. Hannah felt a lump form in her throat. You've been pretending, she whispered. Eleanor nodded. She's not pretend, she said, her voice cracking. She's my baby. Hannah's hands trembled. Eleanor had built a life around a lie. She had trapped herself inside her own grief. Hannah swallowed hard. She had to get out. Slowly, carefully, she took another step back. Eleanor, I think you need help. The woman's face darkened. You're just like the others, she murmured. Hannah's stomach twisted. The others, she repeated. Eleanor's expression turned blank. The nannies before you, she said. Hannah's blood ran cold. Before she could react, Eleanor grabbed her wrist. You can't leave, she whispered. Not now. Not when Lily has finally accepted you. Hannah's breath hitched. She tried to pull away, but Eleanor's grip was stronger than it should have been. Panic shot through her veins. She needed to get out. Now. If you're enjoying this story, leave your like, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications to stay updated with all our content. Hannah's heart pounded against her ribs as Eleanor's grip tightened around her wrist. She fought the urge to scream. The house was too quiet. No one would hear her, and even if they did, would they believe her? She forced herself to stay calm. Eleanor, she said slowly, carefully. Let go. The older woman shook her head. Her expression was distant, almost dreamlike. You don't understand, Eleanor whispered. Lily needs you. She likes you. You can't leave now. Hannah's breath came in short, sharp gasps. The air in the room felt too thick. The doll lay on the bed, its glassy eyes staring at nothing. Hannah couldn't look at it. Her focus was on Eleanor, on the way her fingers dug into Hannah's wrist, on the emptiness in her eyes. She was unstable, and unstable people were dangerous. Hannah swallowed hard. She needed to get out of here. But if she pushed too hard, Eleanor might snap. So she took a slow, steady breath and lied. You're right, she murmured. Eleanor blinked. What? You're right, Hannah repeated, keeping her voice soft. Lily needs me. I shouldn't have tried to leave. Eleanor's grip loosened just slightly. You understand? Yes. Hannah forced a smile she didn't feel. I was just overwhelmed. It's a lot to take in. Eleanor exhaled slowly, her body relaxing. Hannah resisted the urge to run. She had one chance. If she moved too soon, Eleanor might lock her in. Or worse. She didn't want to think about that. So instead, she took a step forward. Closer, not away. Eleanor's expression softened. That makes me happy, she murmured. Hannah nodded. Why don't I go to the kitchen and make us some tea? She suggested. We can talk. About Lily. Eleanor smiled. For the first time, she looked relieved. That's a wonderful idea, she said, her voice lighter now. She finally let go of Hannah's wrist. And in that moment, Hannah moved. She turned, stepped into the hallway, and locked herself in the bathroom. Her hands shook as she fumbled with the lock. Her reflection in the mirror was pale, terrified. She reached for her phone, her fingers trembling. 911. She pressed call. A voice crackled on the other end. 911. What's your emergency? Hannah's throat felt tight. She forced the words out. I'm at 306 Waverley Place, she whispered. I need help. There's a woman here, Eleanor Harper. She's mentally unstable. She thinks her daughter is still alive, but a knock on the door. Hannah's blood went cold. She covered the phone with her hand. "Eleanor," she called, forcing her voice to sound normal. "Are you all right, dear?" Eleanor's voice was gentle. Too gentle. "Why, yeah," Hannah stammered. "Just needed a moment." Silence. Then the door handle turned. Locked. Eleanor hummed softly. "You won't leave me," she whispered through the door. "I won't let you." Hannah's heart slammed against her ribs. The dispatcher's voice broke through the speaker. "Ma'am, are you in immediate danger?" Hannah exhaled sharply. "Yes." The next 5 minutes felt like an eternity. Hannah pressed her ear to the door, listening. Eleanor wasn't moving. She was waiting. The air felt thick, suffocating. Then, the sound of sirens. A sharp, distant wail cutting through the silence. Hannah's knees nearly buckled. She turned the lock slowly, carefully. Then, a loud knock at the front door. "New York Police Department," a deep voice called. "Open the door." Eleanor gasped. For a moment, just a moment, Hannah thought she might do something drastic. But then, Eleanor let out a broken sob. She whispered something Hannah couldn't hear. Then, footsteps. Eleanor moved toward the door. Hannah waited. A moment later, she heard the door creak open. Voices. Men. Officers. She finally unlocked the bathroom door and stepped out. And what she saw broke her. Eleanor was on the floor, cradling the doll in her arms. Her body trembled, her shoulders shaking with silent cries. A police officer knelt beside her, speaking gently. "Eleanor, ma'am, you're not in trouble, but you need help." Eleanor rocked back and forth. "They always take her from me," she whispered. "They always take my baby." Hannah's chest ached. She had been terrified of Eleanor only minutes ago. But now, all she saw was a woman drowning in grief. A woman who had lost everything and couldn't let go. The officers helped Eleanor to her feet. Hannah took a deep breath. "Will she be okay?" she asked quietly. One of the officers, an older man, sighed. "We'll get her the help she needs," he said. "But it's going to be a long road." Hannah nodded. She turned to Eleanor one last time. Eleanor met her eyes. And for the first time, she looked relieved, like a woman who had finally been set free. By the time Hannah stepped outside, the sun was rising. The cold morning air felt different, lighter. She was free. But as she walked down the quiet street, one thought haunted her. How many other people like Eleanor were out there, trapped in their own grief? And how many others had been pulled into their world, just like she had? Hannah had survived, but she wasn't sure she'd ever forget. Hannah sat in the back of a police car, staring blankly out the window as the sun climbed higher over the city. She wasn't in trouble. They had assured her of that. She was simply being taken to the station to give her statement. Still, her hands trembled in her lap. The last few hours felt surreal. The dull, Eleanor's vacant eyes. The way she had cradled it like a real child. The memory made Hannah's stomach twist. She had always imagined fear as something loud, something that screamed in the back of your mind, telling you to run. But tonight, she had learned that true fear was quiet. It was the moment before the scream, the silence before the truth was spoken. And Eleanor Harper had been drowning in that silence for 5 long years. At the police station, Hannah sat across from Detective Mark Calloway, a broad-shouldered man in his early 40s with tired eyes and a permanent frown. He folded his hands on the desk, watching her carefully. "You're lucky you got out," he said. "The last nanny who worked for Eleanor wasn't so fortunate." Hannah's heart stopped. She swallowed. "What do you mean?" Calloway exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Eleanor Harper has been on our radar for years," he admitted. "She lost her daughter, her real daughter Lily, in a house fire 5 years ago. The official cause was an electrical malfunction. But—" He hesitated. "But what?" Hannah pressed. Calloway sighed. "There were rumors. People in the neighborhood suspected that Eleanor wasn't in her right mind, that she might have had something to do with it." Hannah's stomach churned. A fire, a child lost, and yet Eleanor refused to let her go. Hannah's voice came out hoarse. "You said the last nanny wasn't so fortunate." Calloway's jaw tightened. 2 years ago," he said, "a young woman named Rebecca Evans took the job as Lily's nanny. Same circumstances as you, desperate for work, no place to go. She lived in that house for 6 months. Hannah's pulse quickened. "What happened to her?" Calloway hesitated. Then, finally, he said it. "She disappeared." Hannah felt a wave of nausea. No, that couldn't be right. "But I never saw anything," she started, but Calloway shook his head. "Rebecca's case went cold," he continued. "No signs of a struggle. No body. Just gone. Eleanor told the police Rebecca left on her own, and without evidence, we couldn't prove otherwise." Hannah's fingers dug into her knees. If she hadn't called the police last night, would she have been next? She shuddered at the thought. Calloway studied her. "You're lucky, Miss Lawson. You got out before she decided you were part of her world." Hannah swallowed hard. She had been terrified of Eleanor, but now all she felt was pity. Later that night, Hannah lay awake in the motel room Sylvia had helped her pay for. She couldn't sleep. Her mind wouldn't let her. She kept seeing Eleanor's face. The way her fingers trembled as she held the doll. The way she whispered, "They always take her from me." Hannah turned over, staring at the ceiling. Eleanor hadn't tried to hurt her. She had only wanted to keep Lily alive. And yet, someone else hadn't been so lucky. Rebecca Evans. Hannah had barely escaped with her sanity intact. But Rebecca had never walked away. And that was a truth Hannah would never forget. Anna sat at the edge of her motel bed, staring at the flickering neon light outside her window. It had been 2 days since she had escaped Eleanor Harper's house. 2 days since she had learned about Rebecca Evans. 2 days since she had truly slept. The exhaustion ran deeper than just her body. It was in her bones, in her thoughts, in the way she flinched every time she heard a creaking door. She had thought working for the Whitmores had been bad. She had thought Philip Calloway was the worst kind of employer. But nothing, compared to what she had lived through with Eleanor. And yet, despite everything, there was a nagging question in the back of her mind. What really happened to Rebecca? She had asked Detective Calloway if they would investigate further, but his response had been grim. "Without new evidence, there's not much we can do." That was it. A young woman had vanished, and the world had simply moved on. Hannah squeezed her eyes shut. She needed to move on too. She needed another job, another chance to survive. She took a slow breath and reached for her phone, scrolling through job listings again. That's when she saw it. Nanny needed for infant girl, 10 months. Loving, attentive caregiver required. Live-in position. Generous pay. The name below the listing was Olivia Davenport. Hannah bit her lip. It sounded safe. And after everything, she needed something normal. She hesitated only a moment before tapping apply. The next morning, Hannah arrived at an upscale apartment building in Manhattan. It was sleek, modern, nothing like Eleanor Harper's house. It screamed wealth, but not in the suffocating way the Whitmore estate had. She took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. The door opened almost immediately, revealing a beautiful woman in her early 30s with dark, wavy hair and striking blue eyes. "Hi," the woman greeted warmly. "You must be Hannah." Hannah nodded. "Yes. It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Davenport." "Oh, please, just Olivia," the woman said with a soft laugh. "Come in." Hannah stepped inside, immediately noticing how spotless everything was. Minimalist, chic. But there was something else, too. Something sterile, like a home that had been decorated, not lived in. Hannah shook the thought away. She needed this job. She needed stability. "I'll be honest," Olivia said as she led her toward the living room. "I haven't had much luck with nannies. Most don't last long." Hannah hesitated. "Why not?" Olivia sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Let's just say, Katerina is a difficult baby." Hannah frowned. "Difficult how?" Olivia's smile faltered. "She cries a lot," she said vaguely. "She's fussy, and I have a demanding job, so I need someone I can trust." Hannah nodded. "I understand." Olivia studied her. "You seem young," she said, "but experienced." "I am," Hannah assured her. "I've worked with children for years." Olivia nodded slowly, then gestured toward the hallway. "Would you like to meet Katerina?" Hannah smiled. "Of course." When they stepped into the nursery, Hannah's heart softened. Katerina was beautiful, tiny, with round cheeks and wide brown eyes that blinked up at Hannah in curiosity. Hannah instinctively reached out, brushing a gentle hand over the baby's soft hair. "Hello, sweetheart," she murmured. Katerina giggled, her little hands grasping the air. And just like that, Hannah felt it, that connection. She had felt it with Benjamin. She had felt it, briefly, with Henry. And now, Katerina. She looked up at Olivia. "She seems like a wonderful baby." Olivia smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "You haven't seen her at her worst yet," she murmured. There was something off about the way she said it. But before Hannah could dwell on it, Olivia clapped her hands together. "Great," she said. "You can start tomorrow." Hannah moved in the next day. The job itself seemed easy enough. Katerina was fussy, yes, but nothing Hannah hadn't dealt with before. She fed her, changed her, sang her to sleep. Olivia, however, was rarely home, and when she was, something about her felt cold. She never held Katerina, never kissed her. It was as if she was just tolerating her presence. Hannah tried not to overthink it. But then, one evening, while changing Katerina's diaper, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Bruises. Dark, purplish marks along the baby's tiny arms and legs. Hannah's stomach twisted. She touched one lightly, and Katerina let out a soft whimper. "No," Hannah whispered. "No, no, no." She carefully redressed the baby, her mind racing. She had seen bruises before. She knew what abuse looked like. Her chest tightened. She needed proof. And so, that night, after Olivia had left for work, Hannah did something she had never done before. She installed a camera in Katerina's room. Just in case. Just to be sure. She prayed she was wrong, but deep down, she knew she wasn't. The next morning, Hannah checked the footage, and what she saw made her blood freeze. It wasn't Olivia hurting Katerina. It was worse. It was something Hannah could have never imagined, because Olivia wasn't hurting her daughter. She was building something. Something small. Something wooden. A box. A box the exact size of Katerina. Hannah's breath hitched. She stared at the screen, her entire body numb. What was Olivia planning? What the hell was she building? And, most terrifying of all, what was she going to do with her own child? Hannah's hands shook as she watched the footage. On the screen, Olivia moved slowly, methodically, tightening screws, adjusting wooden panels, measuring the dimensions with chilling precision. The box was unmistakable. It was small. Too small. Exactly Katerina's size. Hannah's breath came in shallow gasps. Her mind raced. Was Olivia planning to trap her own child? Or worse, bury her? A wave of nausea crashed over her. This couldn't be happening. Not again. Not another helpless child in danger. She had to do something. She grabbed her phone, her fingers hovering over the dial pad. 911. But she hesitated. What if she was wrong? What if there was an explanation? But then, she thought of Katerina's bruises. The way Olivia barely looked at her own daughter. The way she had said, "You haven't seen her at her worst yet." A shiver ran down Hannah's spine. No, she couldn't risk it. She pressed call. The dispatcher's voice was calm. 911, what's your emergency? Hannah swallowed hard. My name is Hannah Lawson, she whispered. I'm a nanny, and I think the mother of the child I care for is planning something dangerous. There was a pause. Can you explain? Hannah forced herself to breathe. I have footage, she said, of her building something. A small wooden box. It's the exact size of the baby. And the baby has bruises. The dispatcher's tone shifted. Where are you right now? Hannah clenched her jaw. I'm still in the house. She could hear her own heartbeat. Stay where you are, the dispatcher instructed. Officers are on their way. Hannah nodded, even though they couldn't see her. She ended the call. And then, the front door clicked open. Olivia was home. Hannah's mind screamed at her to move. She quickly turned off the baby monitor screen and slipped the camera into her pocket. Katerina was asleep in her crib, completely unaware of the danger. Hannah pressed a gentle hand to the baby's back, whispering, I won't let anything happen to you. She turned toward the hallway. Footsteps echoed on the tile floor. Then, Olivia's voice. Hannah! Hannah stepped out of the nursery, forcing herself to stay calm. Hi, Olivia. The woman raised an eyebrow. You're still awake? Hannah smiled weakly. Katerina had trouble sleeping. Olivia studied her for a moment, then glanced toward the nursery. Her expression softened, but Hannah didn't believe it. Not anymore. I appreciate your hard work, Olivia murmured. It's hard to find good nannies these days. Hannah's stomach twisted. She knew. She knew something was off. And then, a sharp knock at the door. Hannah's chest tightened. Olivia froze. Her blue eyes darkened. Who is that? She asked. Hannah's throat felt tight. I don't know, she lied. Olivia's jaw clenched. Another knock. Then, New York Police Department. Open up. Hannah felt relief flood her body. But Olivia's face changed. For the first time, Hannah saw fear flicker across her features. A second later, Olivia moved. Fast. She turned on her heel and ran toward the nursery. No. Hannah's body reacted before her mind could catch up. She lunged, grabbing Olivia's wrist. "Let go!" Olivia shrieked, struggling. "Don't you dare touch her!" Hannah cried. They fought. Olivia clawed at Hannah's arms, but she refused to let go. Then, the door burst open. Officers stormed inside. "Get down!" one of them shouted. Olivia went still. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. For a second, the only sound was Katerina's cries. Then, one of the officers stepped forward. "Olivia Davenport," he said, calm but firm. "Step away from the nanny. Now." Olivia's breath hitched. Then, slowly, she let go. Two officers moved forward, grabbing her by the arms. Hannah stumbled back, her entire body shaking. It was over, or so she thought, because then, Olivia laughed. A chilling, empty laugh. And when she turned to Hannah, her blue eyes were cold as ice. "You think you saved her?" she whispered. Hannah stiffened. Olivia tilted her head. "You have no idea," she murmured. Then, she smiled. A slow, eerie smile that made Hannah's stomach twist. And for the first time, Hannah wondered, what if Olivia wasn't building the box for Katerina? What if she had built it for someone else? The police took Olivia away that night. Hannah stayed with Katerina, rocking her gently, pressing kisses to her soft hair. The officers told her she had saved the baby's life, that she was a hero. But all she could think about was Olivia's last words. "You have no idea." Hannah didn't know what they meant, and maybe she never would. But she did know one thing. Katerina was safe, and that was all that mattered. 1 month later, Hannah signed the adoption papers. She was no longer a nanny. She was a mother. Katerina was hers. And for the first time in a long time, Hannah felt whole. She had been discarded, humiliated, accused. She had suffered through nightmares no one should ever endure. But in the end, she had found her purpose, and it had been waiting for her all along. Katerina giggled in her arms, her tiny fingers curling around Hannah's shirt. "Mommy," she babbled. Hannah's eyes filled with tears. She smiled, holding her daughter close. "You're safe now," she whispered, "and I'll never let anyone hurt you again." Because now, she had something worth fighting for, and no one would ever take Katerina from her. And if you like this story, you'll surely love the next one appearing on your screen. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave your like, and turn on notifications. See you next time.